Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today we have a guest who I have actually known for nearly the entirety of my special needs mom journey. Beth is somebody that actually is very near and dear to me and happens to be this incredible woman. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Beth Thorp is a philanthropist, author, speaker, and co-founder and executive director of the Mitchell Thorp Foundation. It's a public 501c3 organization. Their mission is to support families whose children suffer from life-threatening illnesses, diseases, and disorders by providing financial, emotional, and resources to their desperate situation. Beth also has a new book called A New Creation, and it was written as a labor of love for her son Mitchell, who passed away from an undiagnosed illness after 5 years of searching the planet for answers. In her work as a philanthropist and leadership, she has been recognized by actually too many to list. However, I'm going to include them in the show notes because I think it's pretty notable to see how the community has recognized the impact that Beth has had. And as we get into the episode, you can tell that Beth and I have a lot to talk about. We kind of stuff a lot into this interview. You might have to break it up into 2 pieces. I know it got a little bit long, but make sure you do stick around till the end because I think that there's something very significant about hearing a story like Beth's And we're not just talking about the happy ending, if you will, where she has this beautiful organization that helps people. She tells the whole story of what it was like to be in the before parts, probably closer to where you might feel like you're at today. And I share an excerpt from her book that was significantly meaningful to me as I walked through my own dark valley this year. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Welcome, Beth. Beth Thorp. I'm actually rather emotional about introducing you on this podcast because of who you are in my life. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to go back to start, to recount the day where I had you in my living room and you came at a time, you were literally like an angel. For those of you, you probably can't see Beth, but she has very light blonde hair. And so she looks very angelic as she's like illuminated from the inside out. And I remember the first conversation with you and Brad, your husband. You came over to my little townhome in Carlsbad. We sat on my green couches, the very edge. So we were kind of abutted next to each other. And you gave me the devotional Jesus Calling. And you told us all the different ways the foundation that you have created, we'll talk more about that later, could help. And I just remember thinking, this was the Hail Mary, the like thing I could never conceive of, the help that we knew we needed but didn't even know existed. And I just felt so relieved that somebody was literally by my side, able to help us. Mm. And I want to go back and do you remember that conversation?
I do. I remember that well. And you only had 3 children at the time.
I actually had 2.5.
Oh, 2.5.
I was pregnant. So this conversation happened in January of 2012. I was walking along a street fair, Art Splash, and there was a booth and there was a sign. And the sign said, the Mitchell Thorp Foundation, supporting families with
children with life-threatening illnesses, diseases, and disorders.
I always mess it up. And exactly. So I read this sign. I'm like sitting there and my kid's like coloring something at a booth. And I'm like, I'm like looking at it. I'm like, that's exactly that's me. Like, that is what I need. Like, this is the weirdest experience seeing this foundation that's helping people. And I'm like, that's exactly me. So I filled out an online form. In a few days or weeks, I don't remember, later, Brad reached out and we set up this appointment. And we were facing, so Levi was just a couple months out of the hospital at that time. He had relearned to walk. This is, of course, from his first brain surgery and recovery. I was pregnant. I was due to have a baby in March. And that January, we started a new year. What all my medical moms know is that resets the deductible for your insurance if you have a deductible. And our deductible was $9,000. And because of the intensity of what Levi was going through, like, we fully expected that we would have to expend that much money in 1 month. Meanwhile, I'm not working any longer because I'm supporting my son, and my husband had just started his own business. So that was bad timing. And so we had this like desperate need for dollars to be able to support our son. And so you being in our living room and kind of giving us a way that we could actually fundraise, but actually that the bigger community could come alongside us. So what do you remember back from that day, back in January 2011?
Well, I remember that specifically when I met you at the Art Splash. And you were with the buggy in tow, and you just stood there in front of our booth and it was just staring. And I remember coming up to you and introducing myself and what we can help you with and trying to hear your story. And so we touched on that a little bit. And I just felt like God appointed us to meet. Does that make sense? It's like, it was like that divine appointment, so to speak. If some are not familiar with the Christian faith or have faith. God works in mysterious and awesome ways. And we operate that way because I know that sometimes people, I just say, Lord, you know who we're supposed to help. We just suit up and show up. I mean, we get a lot of referrals from a lot of the children's hospitals up and down the coast, but it's always a nice surprise when you run into someone like you. And I could see it in your eyes, the desperation. And so it was awesome to be able to come into your home and just explain what we do. And the foundation can support and donate a grant, but then we knew your needs were going to be much bigger and ongoing, which is usually the case for many families, that the best way for you to do that then is through our foundation. We had a crowdfunding platform where we started to explain how we can set up a page for him, for Levi, that when you come across people who will ask you, how can we help? Then you say, well, you can help us so much by going to the Mitchell Thorp Foundation. Levi has a page, and donate to that. And that'll help pay for all our bills that we're incurring, our co-pays and everything that we are buried under. So it was another way or an opportunity we knew as the foundation to help more families even bigger when we know their needs are going to be longer. So that was exciting to be able to share that with you. And we just kind of grown up with you. It's like you're like our second adopted
Well,
kids.
I'm just thinking,
Like our adopted kids.
you saw me. This is a lot of years ago now. And that was, I think, we're coming up on the 11th year of that. And I was a very different person 11 years ago. I was a much softer version of myself. And I say that with love for the who I was, but I hadn't yet been tested. I hadn't yet been through the fire. Well, I mean, I had at that point really, but I think I was just stunned at that point still. And I think having hope at a really dark time was so meaningful. And so you've gotten to see me journey through, and I talk a lot about the opportunities that you offered. I was going to say force me into, but you didn't force me. It was like, hey, Kara, do you want to, the news needs somebody. Do you want to do the news thing? Bring Levi and be on the news. And I was like, sure. I'm always game. I'm always saying yes. And then I get there and I'm petrified. Actually, this is a funny story. I don't know if you remember this. I'm like petrified. Like I can barely breathe level petrified. And since I've come a long way, I mean, look, I'm doing a podcast now, but I was petrified. And during the live interview, Levi's on my lap. He's cute as can be. I think you're probably obviously in the frame somewhere. He farts on my leg during live TV. And I think it was very helpful because it really helped me loosen up a little bit because I was like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. So do you have any recollection of the fart?
No. None whatsoever. So, it was, that was probably a good thing for you, just so you could relax with it. But look what I've done to help you break out of your shell, right?
You really have.
Now you're speaking and you're doing your podcasts. And so, I have a way of kind of seeing people and what your potential is. And I always saw that in you. And I remember saying, I don't know what it is,
I do.
Down the road, we're going to have to collaborate some way, somehow. And we're still figuring that out. But
we are.
Anyway, but you have something very special to give back. And you're growing. You were just starting your journey with this, where we walked it and came out of it, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But it's a hard walk. I don't wish it upon anyone. You don't wish it upon anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in it, you don't question really. You just have to keep doing the next indicated thing. Which we can talk about that too, what that means, especially when it came to my son's case.
Well, let's actually transition and I would love for the listeners to hear your story, to hear the journey that you've been through. And so why don't you start with telling us a little bit about just the picture of your life right before Mitchell got ill, and just kind of walk us through your journey in a shortened version.
We were happy, in love, beautiful family, 2 healthy children. They were not born with any issues. Hardly ever went to the doctor, except for the common earache or every now and then, but very rarely. It was really when Mitchell was starting 7th grade, his 13th birthday. Toward the middle of that year, he started experiencing headaches, severe headaches. And it slowly got worse. And we did the natural thing as any parent, right? Headaches. We thought he had the flu, the common things you go through. You check the list off, take his temperature, give him a pain reliever. And then it didn't really go away. It kind of, you didn't think about it. So then you go to the doctor, you take him to your pediatrician, and they just say, well, have you checked his eyes? Maybe he has eye strain, or maybe he's got allergies and he's suffering headaches from that. So, okay, check the list. We'll go get that done and get the allergist test done. So you keep checking off the list, right? Of things you know as any parent to just try to do. Because we did not at that time think that it was as serious or anything at that time, just that he was sick. So as time went on and we began to see that the headaches were progressing and the pain in his head, and we were like, this is not normal. And we know he was a very athletic young man. His love for baseball, he played many sports, basketball, little flag football, but his love was always baseball. His father played in the Los Angeles Dodgers organization in AA. It was a pitcher. So they grew that love of baseball from their father, which was a beautiful gift that Brad was able to give the boys, and coached many young boys in baseball throughout the community. So again, moving forward, pain was getting worse, in and out, then went to Rady's to do a full workup. And they couldn't figure out everything. The tests that they did were negative normal, but obviously he wasn't. They helped with his pain with IV meds and sent us home with still no real diagnosis or answer. Yeah. So then you continue living your life, right? Thinking that, okay, well, this must be, I don't know what this is, right? So, and then he comes back until one day he came home from school and he kind of collapsed on the front yard. And he was calling out for me, and I ran out to him and just screamed for Brad to come out, and he picked him up and brought him in the house, and we're trying to ask him, what is going on? Tell us what's happening. And he kept moaning, he kept holding his head and so we knew something was definitely wrong. Yeah. But then you keep going down that road of more doctor visits, more hospital visits, more ER visits. And that kept going on and on and on. The pain in his head get worse and worse. But tests kept coming back negative normal. So then you're beyond what is going on here. This is obviously he's not normal. This is not how he was. What's going on? Doctors couldn't figure it out. Then they thought it was all psychological in his head. And I'm like, that's a whole nother road.
That's a different book. And it's yeah. And
that kind of just about through my husband and I, we were like, you think my son wants to be like this? He's in pain. What's causing his pain? I mean, you start really digging, that type of tone with these doctors. This is your job, not ours, to try and figure this out. And half the time we were always doing, and think back then, Facebook wasn't even really around then. MySpace was. So, you're just talking, well, it's been 13 years with the foundation. So about, 15, 20 years ago. So think about that, the progression between that. So we really had to get Mitchell's story out. And the only way we did that was through print. So his story and his condition was in the Union Tribune, and just seeing if people had heard or seen symptoms like this. We were just hoping for anything, right? Someone to say, oh yeah, just to give us, so-and-so, I know someone who's got those symptoms. Anybody, we're trying to get some kind of answer because we were still undiagnosed. And so when you're undiagnosed, you're still trying to figure out what the heck is going on here. And you keep doing the next indicated thing. So that's the hospital visits. Then we tied it with integrative medicine with different doctors there to treat him holistically, and just kept going both paths with my son. Anyway, to make a long story very short, it was a very long 5-year hard journey of taking him in and out of different hospitals throughout the United States, looking for answers. Countless number of doctors I can't even mention, and all these protocols, which definitely cost a lot of money. So at the end of the day, it nearly bankrupted my husband and I. But as parents, you go to the ends of the earth to help your child. We would have given up the house, if we had to. Literally, you just have to keep. That's how we are as parents. We go to the ends of the earth to help our kids. And then finally, one day, one of my very good friends came to me and they saw how we came out of the UCLA medical hospital when he finally was in so much pain. He was in myoclonic seizures due to pain that drove him. Then finally they told us, take him to either Mayo Clinic or the UCLA Medical Center, which were both research hospitals at the time. So we thought we can't uproot to Minnesota, so let's go to UCLA. So we ended up there for a month. And again, taking what Rady's protocol did, and they did even a further workup. And by then they had him all hooked up to electrodes and everything because he was in myoclonic seizures. And I said, what are myoclonic seizures? And they said, it's pain. What's causing his pain? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he could barely speak. It was just to see your son suffer in those conditions. It's gut wrenching. So when they couldn't really answer everything, they finally brought in a retired neurologist who was like a grandpa figure. He's like in his 80s, and brought him in. And he, it's a research hospital. So all the doctors and the students below them are standing around in Mitchell's room like he's he's a test.
Yeah. Like
case.
a specimen of, yeah.
And then he was just saying, well, have you done this procedure, this test, that test? And they all said, yes, yes, yes. And then finally, he said, I want to see this boy clean, get him off everything. I want him to take him down to a baseline. It was like the best news I ever heard because they were trying to mask everything. And let's get to a baseline, get him off of all this stuff, these medications and drugs. So the only good thing I should say when we left UCLA, they finally could not diagnose him. They wanted to go down the psych road again. I'm like, but then you're in the hands of the doctors there. And once you start questioning their authority, they had the rights to almost take our son away from us. That frightened me terribly, my husband. And we had to find an attorney. Not only you're stressed out enough, right?
Yeah.
To help your child. Now we're faced with that they can take our son away. I put him in a psych ward. He would have surely died. So we agreed to let them do all their psychological, bring their people in to do all their tests. As much as Mitchell could do, he couldn't even respond.
Yeah.
Because he's in so much pain. And then finally, in the paperwork, they say it's not psychological. And I'm biting my tongue, as like any mother would, right? Are you freaking kidding me? Like I told you, anyway, it's not psychological. Okay, so then why would you take this course of action to say he needs to be placed in a psych ward? I says, this is unacceptable. And so we get to the point of like saying, well, what do we need to do? You have no more answers here for us. And they basically, hospitals are very scared of being sued. So they take every precaution. I had to have everything lined up here at home. Basically, they told me to just, my husband, take him home, basically hospice care, palliative care, they called it at the time. But we still weren't giving up on my son. So we hired a nutritionist, an osteopath. We had a physical therapist, his school teacher to come still to the house to read to him. He couldn't really respond or do much work by then. We had a pastor. So we were tapping into his spiritual side as well with Mitch. All in place, had people write letters to get him, this is the care we're going to be showing you that we're going to be doing when we take him on here. So anyway, they said finally they would release him. And they drove us back. They put him in an ambulance. They wouldn't let him come home in our car. So we had to pay for an ambulance ride.
My goodness.
When you start adding up, when you say dollars.
Yeah.
So a 2-hour ride from LA back to Orange, San Diego. And you're thinking, okay, just add to the bill.
Put it on my tab.
Yeah. So anyway, he came home. He was able to survive. There was a glimmer of hope there, definitely with the protocol. The promising thing out of the UCLA by then, they put in a G tube because he was losing too much weight at an alarming rate. He couldn't eat. They helped break the myoclonic seizures, which was a good thing. So at that point, nutrition was our main thing at that point to get him he was growing at the same time and losing so much weight and he wasn't surviving. So we had ladies, my friends, my nutritionist was awesome. She created Mitchell's formula. And it was, I showed her the canned formula that they were feeding him, and she took one look at that and the ingredients. And here's a true nutritionist. She said, oh my God, I would not give that to my dog. That was her response. And, and you're like, she's, oh, no. So we're not doing that. So we organically juiced everything. And she had all kinds of breaking, vitamin capsules and everything that she needed in there to gain weight, to build them up on the cellular level. So that was only the promising thing that he left UCLA with, because he was no way could get those things down his throat. He couldn't even swallow.
Yeah.
So for us to then put it through his G tube, and again, any tinctures that needed to be put in that the osteopath wanted to start doing around the clock. So, the osteopath was great. He was, again, very expensive to keep coming to the home, making doctor home visits. But again, you do anything that you possibly can to save a child. And we were doing everything we could, no stone unturned, that we kept going through. And he really was the first one that made sense of it all and said he has some infection that's causing inflammation in his brain that's affecting his central nervous system. And we also tested him for heavy metals, and he was elevated in some of the metals. And we were like, oh my God, did someone poison my son? At school, we're like, so we had myself, my other son, and Brad tested in the house. And they did that through a hair analysis and to see what our levels were. But it was only Mitchell that was elevated, and we were in the normal range. So we're like, what caused that? It's still a mystery. Mm-hmm. But then we began to think, drinking out of the water fountain at school, all those lead pipes back then could have been a contributor. But then even arsenic was up. And then you bring this up to your normal doctors, you're like, oh, well, you get metals in all the foods and things you get from the environment and the foods and things that are in. And then my osteopath said, well, in some cases in Mitchell, some people are better at excreting metals than others.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. Yeah.
And some are not good excreters. So then we had to buy a whole infrared sauna system. We started on a whole detox protocol for him. Again, checking the boxes, keep doing the next indicated thing. We still had no diagnosis. So we're still running around trying to figure out. It's like an onion. We had to keep peeling one layer of the onion for him and keep seeing what worked, what glimmer of hope we saw made some improvement. So here we are 5 years later, and I'll skip forward, but he progressed better. They sent him home on his deathbed, and then we were able to make him look, he was coming around, actually. He still wasn't speaking. We got him to the point where we were able to get him a standing frame and try to get him to put weight on his legs, and still not speaking, though. That always mystifies me, why the ability to talk. The osteopath was finally I was able to see Mitchell stop grabbing his head so much from the head pain. That was a problem. That was like, wow, that was huge, because we were chasing pain all the time in his head. So that was a really wonderful thing to see, where pain medications they hardly even touched it, like Tylenol or anything. And I didn't want to keep giving him pain meds the rest of his life, right?
Yeah, well, especially if they're not working and knowing that his body's having a hard time processing things. So I totally get that.
It was really challenging. It was a 5-year. I know how grueling it is. Day in and day out, you're in the battlefield. You're on the battlegrounds of constantly doing the next indicated thing. You're constantly trying to find answers, trying to help your child out of pain or whatever the situation is, to try and find some sense of normalcy, right? We're all trying to find that balance, that sense of normalcy. So that was a big part of the foundation too, is what can help bring some sense of normalcy. We even saw it affect the siblings. My other son, they are definitely affected. Your siblings are affected by the whole thing. So it's very important. I mean, there was nothing back then that we could go to like our foundation. That's why we formed it.
Yeah.
We have counseling for the whole family, trauma counseling for the whole family, as well as the affected child going through it. And because it affects everyone so differently, right? It's just a hard walk. No
it's very
question.
hard.
And on the marriage.
Yes, definitely. Well, walk us back. So it was a 5-year battle. And obviously I know how it ended, if you will, but walk us through kind of the passing of Mitchell and how you moved on from that?
That was really challenging. We, again, doing the next protocols and the next thing that people thought he should do. And I knew that there was two underlying situations with Mitch. Not only something was affecting his central nervous system, but when he was playing baseball, his jaw got hit. So his discs in his jawline were out of alignment. So, that's always in the back of your mind going, is that causing his head pain? Because I've heard people who've had jaw issues, it causes severe head pain. And he's always been so sick, we've been never able to fix them or put them back in place. So we got him to the point where we found a doctor in Texas. We explained Mitchell's situation, and that he's not like a normal, healthy person. I mean, he's coming out of horrific, something else that we don't even know is attacking his central nervous system on, which we still did not have a true diagnosis of. But it was always gnawing at us that was never fixed. And if that was still driving part of the pain. We took him there. Obviously, he could not get on an airplane. We looked at different things from angel flights, but he would have had to have walked on that flight. He wasn't able to walk. And he couldn't walk on a normal aircraft. So we rented an RV and we drove him there to Texas. And it was there that the doctor assured me that he would be fine and that he's one of the best that does these. And if we don't do it, you'll never know, kind of thing. At the end of the day, we were in the hospital, and quite frankly, it was human error. He should have been in intensive care. He was intensive care and out of recovery. He came out saying he's fine. He did well. Right? Sigh of relief. Oh my gosh. Thank goodness. So now it's getting him healing back up. So they put him in our room. In my opinion, in hindsight, looking back, he should have been in intensive care.
Yeah, there's a big difference between, when you do these hospital visits, the difference between intensive care and all the other levels.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yes, I hear
and
you.
He should have been that's right. In hindsight, I look back on that as human error on the doctor or the hospital in not knowing his condition going in.
Yeah.
Right. So it was in like the wee hours of the morning. I'll never forget it. Brad left the room around midnight to go back to the RV to sleep. And I'm on in the hospital room, in his room on a chair, right? They don't have nice things for parents to sleep on, as all mothers know, or dads. But anyway, Brad left. It was like 3 a.m. A nurse came in. You could barely hear her, right? Checking vitals. All of a sudden, a code blue, or code blue, code red, I don't even remember now what it was, went off. And oh my gosh, I should say hell broke loose. I'm screaming. They're running in with the team. They said, get her out of here. Get her out of here. I'm a basket case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, a basket case. And I'm on my hands and knees crying, as any mother would, right? As they're working on your son, praying to God, Mitchell, stay. Mitchell, hang on, right? Mitchell, hang in there. Mitchell, hang in there. And I'm calling my sister. I'm in Texas. It's wee hours in the morning and she's in Arizona. Bless her heart, though. She answered the phone. And I'm screaming. She hears me and I'm screaming and wailing. And she's just praying with me on the other line. And, 45 minutes later, they came in and said, I'm so sorry. And you want to die? I couldn't move. That's when you're in shock. I was like a deer in headlights. They said, where's your husband? I could barely understand what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Walked me out of the hospital. I said, he's outside in the RV, and I'm banging on the RV door, and he wasn't waking up, and I'm banging on the RV door, and he finally opens the door. He's all groggy, and he looks at me, and he could tell. I said, Mitchell died. Mitchell passed away. And he's like, so he grabs me. We ran to his room, and they were very, they just, what do they say? You just say, well, Mr. Thorp, we'll get him cleaned up and get him ready for you. And we stayed with Mitchell till the sun came up. praying over him. And yeah, it was our darkest night. Our darkest night. Never want to wish it upon anyone, right? No one wants to lose a child. And no matter our situation or the devastating things that just happened in Uvalde, Texas, I mean, it's just like, it's horrific. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be with you in that story. Yeah. And it's moving it's like, I know the story. I've read your book. I've known you for years, and it's moving and powerful to hear you recount it. And I think that's one thing I wanted to highlight in this episode is the hope that we can provide each other as moms that have journeyed through the unthinkable. And I think ultimately you and I align that, like, I think this hope is ultimately from God and who he has given us in our lives. But on the more like tangible, seekable level, I think I can look back at that first meeting of you and I can recognize I knew your story. I did not know the details. I did not know what the 5 years looked like, but I knew your son had died. I knew you had to say goodbye to your son. And in my shoes, that was the worst case scenario, right? Like I was facing the fear of what if I actually lose him? Mm-hmm. And so to see you at this point, right? So like fast forward this years and we can kind of talk about this next step for you and like what you ultimately created. But to be able to see you helping others, living really beautifully, letting God's love shine through you in a very powerful, tangible way. Like literally you were sitting in my living room, right? So it's like very tangible that she is alive. She is well. She is no longer wailing on the floor, right? Like, I think that's all you can just picture. Like you can't even imagine what's beyond that and how one could process that to the point where they could live on the other side when you've never been through it. And so I think to see you gave me such hope, more than I think I could articulate at the time, but like there was something about it. It's like, she's okay. Maybe I'll be okay too. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about what's next, like what was next for you. So you said goodbye to Mitchell, and I know through your book, and we'll share more about that later, like you share the whole story, like it wasn't overnight. And we're going to press pause right there. I know I left such a cliffhanger. In the editing of this show, we decided to break it up into 2 episodes so that it was a little bit easier to digest, as I know that during the summer season, moms are often on the go. And so having longer episodes sometimes is a little bit harder to work with. So the conversation with Beth will continue next week. And it's almost like kind of split it up into like the before and after. And like I indicated in the introduction of this episode, the after part is a beautiful part of the story. But when you have the foundation of what Beth endured, what Mitchell endured, what the whole family experienced, then I think it really sets up the context for next week's episode. And I really love that, you got to kind of hear Beth's story, how it then intersected and became our story as she came alongside and supported me. So you're going to get to hear more about that. We'll see you on the next episode. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.